So, I've been talking about this umbrella study on antidepressants, which found no strong link between taking antidepressants and recovering from depression. To me, this wasn't a surprise because of the work that I'd done with my former therapist, Amar Barada. But for a lot of people, it is a surprise because their experience was, well, I felt terrible and I took the antidepressants and I felt better. So how can we account for it? I think that there are some strong ways that we can account for it, and I want to talk about it in this episode. I think that the two important questions to ask are, does it matter how we talk to ourselves about our own emotions? And did we start talking to ourselves differently about our emotions after we took the antidepressants? So let's look at what kinds of things people with emotional problems say to themselves and the different kinds of things that people without emotional problems or the people who are recovering from emotional problems say to themselves. There are two ways to talk to ourselves about our emotions. The first way is I can say to myself things like, I shouldn't be feeling this way. I shouldn't be feeling anxious. I shouldn't be feeling sad. I should be feeling happy. I should be feeling calm. And then there's another way that we can talk to ourselves, which is like this. I say things to myself like, the emotions that I'm feeling make sense given what's important to me. And I accept myself however I feel. So the question is, did we go from talking to ourselves the first way to talking to ourselves the second way after we started taking the antidepressants? And let me talk a little bit before we compare the two about how it leads to a vicious cycle to talk to ourselves that first way, where I'm saying, I shouldn't be feeling anxious. I shouldn't be feeling sad. So if our emotions are connected to what's important in our lives, in other words, they have meaning, if I start to say to myself a lot, to do this very frequently and vigorously and automatically without knowing I'm doing it, if I start to say to myself, I've got to get rid of these feelings. I shouldn't be feeling this way. Shouldn't be feeling anxious. I shouldn't be feeling depressed. Well, just telling myself that isn't going to probably lead to me feeling differently. What it's probably going to do is I'm going to feel even more anxious and depressed when the feelings keep arising. And the feelings themselves become occasion to feel more negative feelings. It's a negative feedback loop. It's a vicious cycle. So I say to myself, why am I feeling sad? I gotta stop feeling sad. And then I try to change my feelings. And when I realize I can't change my feelings, I feel even more sad. And the same thing with anxiety. I've got to calm down. And when I try to force myself to calm down, I feel less calm. And then I feel even more anxiety about how I'm not able to control my feelings. It's a terrible place to be. And a lot of us have spent good chunks of our lives caught in those vicious cycles. I have. So the opposite of the kind of language that leads to a vicious cycle is one that normalizes and validates the original feelings. And even normalizes and validates the fact that I got myself into a problem. I've got a problem here with how I'm talking to myself. I'm not just suffering, I'm in trouble now. And even that is okay. It's understandable how I got this way because I care about being in good emotional health. And I thought that what would work would be to uh, scold myself severely, um, because in other areas of life, it does work well to try to muster a lot of motivation and to use a strong correcting sort of energy. It turns out in this case, when I'm talking about my own emotions, it wasn't the right thing, but that's okay. Um, it, I care about myself, and that's how I got myself into this situation. So it's good that I care about myself. This kind of accepting and validating and normalizing language is something that comes naturally to people who don't have emotional problems. And it is the way forward for people who are currently enduring emotional problems. So let's look at, did I go from using the first kind of talk to the second kind of talk when I started to take the antidepressants? Okay, what sort of things might we be saying to ourselves before we take the antidepressants? One thing might be, there's something currently wrong with my feelings. And then you go and look for help, and somebody says, well, these chemicals can change your feelings. You don't have the right amount of serotonin, and these medications can give you the correct amount of serotonin. So now, after you've taken them, you're saying to yourself, my feelings are healthy. They're in the right place. I'm feeling things the right amount now that the correction has been made. So you're attributing it to the medications. And according to this major study, it doesn't look like it's the case that it's the change in serotonin. But what I would like to throw out there is the possibility that I think is really probable, that it has more to do with how you went from telling yourself that your feelings aren't healthy to now telling yourself that the feelings are healthy. Another thing you might say to yourself before taking antidepressants is, I'm abnormal. And then somebody gives you the medications and you say, okay, now I'm normal. It's not necessarily due to the medications, but that is a major change in how a person talks to themselves about their feelings. It's very different to say, something's wrong with me and I'm abnormal and I need to make a change, versus there's nothing wrong with me and I don't need to make any changes. In this case, you're telling yourself that you don't need to make the changes because you've already made some changes. But if it's true that those changes didn't have any more effect than a placebo would, maybe it was that you went from telling yourself that you need changes to now saying you don't need changes. You don't need changes to be made to your feelings. Another thing that we're saying to ourselves before we take antidepressants might be, it's not appropriate to tend to what matters to me in my life when I'm feeling this way. It wouldn't be appropriate to take some steps towards what I care about in my life while my feelings are so uncomfortable and I'm in so much torment. And then, after you take the medications, you might have started saying to yourself, okay, now it's appropriate to tend to what matters to me. But what I think accounts for feeling better, even more than taking the antidepressants, was the fact that you went from thinking that it's inappropriate to work on your life to now saying, okay, it's appropriate to work on my life. Because if our natural emotions do have meaning and they do make sense, then we've got these things that need tending to. And as long as we're not addressing them, or at least acknowledging them, we can expect that the negative feelings of like, hey, there's something not going well here and maybe I'm stagnating, we can expect those feelings to keep coming up. But if we acknowledge the things that need work in our lives and maybe find some ways that they can be tended to somewhat, then we have occasion to feel better, and we develop a sense of self-efficacy. And that's so huge when it comes to recovering from emotional problems. A lot of us are stuck in a situation where we feel like we're helpless, we're not effective, we don't have the inner resources to lead lives that are full of purpose. And the path of recovery involves taking those steps, however small and manageable they might be, and then getting to experience from the inside a real feeling of self-efficacy. Of like, hey, even though I didn't feel very good, I decided to do one or two manageable things on my list, moving towards where I want to be. And I was able to do those little things. And hey, I feel good about that. Another thing that we might have been saying to ourselves before antidepressants is the people in my life are telling me that the way I feel is not okay. And then once you follow the prescribed advice of taking the medications, now the people in your life are saying, okay, cool, you're normal now. And it's okay to have the feelings you have because they're being mitigated by the medication. And that's a big shift. It's a big shift from feeling like there's something wrong with you and everybody knows it and is telling you you've got to change yourself, to now feeling like you don't have something wrong with you. It's been corrected and everybody in your life is saying, all right, you're okay now. So before you took the antidepressants, you were talking to yourself in that first way that I mentioned, saying that you shouldn't be feeling a certain way, you should be feeling a different way, and you must do something about it. And after the medications, you started saying, my feelings are healthy, I'm normal, it's appropriate to attend to the things that matter to me in my life, and the people around me are saying, you're okay. That's a major difference. And according to the study, it doesn't look like it's the change in serotonin levels that led to you feeling better. But I think that there's some pretty strong evidence that you went from talking to yourself in a way that led to vicious cycles and double binds to a way that was more accepting and kind of cleared the path for you to start working on your life again and start experiencing self-efficacy from the inside. So I'd love to hear from you, whoever you are. I'm curious who is listening to this show or watching it on YouTube, and what you have to say about what you're hearing on the show. If there's something you'd like to hear me address, please let me know. You could leave a comment if you're watching this on YouTube, or you could email me at marshallbolin@marshallbolin.com if you are listening to the audio version of this podcast. If you feel like you want some individualized help learning to talk to yourself in a way that is more conducive to being at peace, reach out. I've got time in my schedule to take on more clients, and I would love to meet you and talk to you if you feel like what I have to offer might be a good fit for you. All right. See you later.